Larissa, thanks so much for giving me time to talk today.
No, thank you for having me.
I was just saying, as I read your bio, I was more and more interested to find out a bit more about you and your work. And it's been a real pleasure working with you at RMIT.
Same, exactly the same goes back to you. I think it's wonderful working with you.
So you're the director of the Design and Creative Practice Enabling Capability Platform at RMIT, which focuses on, and I think the bit that I find incredibly valuable is the interdisciplinary collaboration and creative solution generation that you do with that work, with a particular focus on aging well and careful and multi-sensorial methods. Is that a reasonable description?
That sounds perfect. Thank you.
You're a digital ethnographer, an artist, a distinguished professor, and a very widely published author, 12 co-authored books, more than 40 journal articles, and you've edited over a dozen handbooks. So you clearly like to write. It's a phenomenal output.
Yeah.
You also co-founded the Digital Ethnography Research Centre. Can you talk a bit about what does the Research Centre do? What's the focus of that centre?
Yes, well, so I co-founded it with Heather Horse in 2011, and since then it's had two sets of directors. And so now we have Tanya Lewis, Professor Tanya Lewis is directing, and I think also co-directing is Professor Annette Malcolm. So we set up the Digital Ethnography Research Centre nearly a decade ago because both Heather and I were digital ethnographers, and we really saw that with the rise of big data and the rise of data analytics, rather than actually diminishing the meaning for digital ethnography and the relevance, we saw it actually amplifying it. Because the thing about big data is or data, depending on your pronunciation, it tells us a lot about what people do, where they do it, but it doesn't give any insight into motivations. And understanding motivations is the most meaningful part of understanding people. If you can understand somebody's motivation, you can empathize with them. For us, we thought, yes, we really saw the relevance of digital ethnography increasing. And so that's why we set up the research centre. And from then, each director has taken it into a new direction, which is fantastic. This is the thing, you kind of set things off on their journey, and then other people take it on different journeys. So that's really exciting.
Yeah. I completely understand that. I think that's an important reason for regeneration of leadership, actually. But that's a whole other question. What I'm interested in, and you and I have talked about this a number of times, as a researcher, what is it that gives you joy in your work?
And that's a fantastic question. I mean, I think particularly now, given everything that's happening with COVID-19, we are looking at joy as a really important part of resilience. And as somebody who's worked a lot in, kind of areas of grief and loss, it's amazing how some of the people who have experienced the most grief actually end up being the most joyful and resilient. So they're not separate, actually. They're, they speak to each other very closely. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the project that probably is the most joyful for me, probably this was a turning point in my research. So up until this point, I'd pretty much just been looking, as a digital ethnographer, been looking at media, spaces and people, and looking at that dynamic. And myself and Professor Ingrid Richardson, we got an Australian Research Council Discovery Grant looking at mobile games in Australian households. And this was a 3-year study, the first longitude study into mobile games, which at the time people were like, you got a grant to study mobile games. And now with the COVID-19, it's like, it's the one of how kids are socializing. But at the time, we went into people's households. So it was a nationwide study. And we went into the household and we started interviewing people, and we got very diverse households because we wanted to get a sense of, the complexity of what constitutes a household in Australia. But one of the things that kind of started happening in our research was that we would start interviewing and animals kept getting in the way. We'd start videoing, and then a cat would walk across an iPad, and then it would start playing on the iPad, and then a dog would start barking at the iPad. We started thinking, what's going on here? And then both Ingrid and I realized that our research plan was completely wrong, because it wasn't actually about humans and media and space. It was actually about humans, animals, and media. and how media was bringing them together in different ways for different types of sociality and play. And so we completely restructured our methods, putting animals at the centre, because in Australia, one of the really interesting things is that 1 in 3 people prefer animals to people. And we're seeing this a lot with COVID-19 and the fact that
Yes.
Facebook feed is full of new pets.
Yes.
I've seen more
Yes.
of these in my time. Animals really, particularly dogs, give a sense of kind of trust and sociality and kind of companionship, which many people prefer. I think when we think about Australian households, we need to think about the more than human in that. And so that was really joyful for us. I mean, at first it was discombobulating because we were having to rewrite all our methods. You can imagine the ethics application, more red tape.
I can imagine, yeah.
But it made it a much more interesting project and much more robust. And that's what I like about being a digital ethnographer is you walk into a project and you think you have some questions, but you are always led by your participants as experts and their lived experience. And if you're a good enough ethnographer, you will listen to their lived experience and they will shape your methods.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And it's such a wonderful story. So, Larissa, that leads really nicely into my next question, which is about co-design and about the process of co-design and what that means to you and how you use it.
So co-design is a really interesting concept because it's become more and more relevant and more kind of an everyday kind of word. But different disciplines and different industries use it in quite different ways. So for me, as somebody who perhaps is more attuned to its history in terms of participatory design, co-design was always this idea of it being, it's about collaboration, but it's always about, kind of having that collaboration where all the partners and all the stakeholders have equal access to the ideas and the voice. One of the things that has been, kind of problematic that we still need to kind of think through is how do you give voice in systems where certain voices have more currency than others. And so the plight of co-design is really to think through different types of methods and techniques that allow to capture those diverse experiences and voices. And then through that process, and often co-design is used at the same time as thinking about design thinking, so that kind of process of iteration. One of the things that also co-design is really important about is it helps onboard partners. So when you're co-designing with partners, because they can see their voice in the co-design, it means that then it becomes their project as well. So particularly for researchers, when you're working with industry, if they can see their voice in the solution, then they implement it. And that's how you get impactful research. So co-design is really crucial for impactful research.
Absolutely. So, Larissa, I'm going to explore that concept of co-design further with you in a conversation that we'll schedule as soon as we can, because I think you're right. It's incredibly important at the moment in understanding what's going on in our world. That's very hard to get a grip on what's going on around us for a whole range of reasons, and given how rapidly it's changing. So thank you very much for your time today. Really looking forward to talking further.
Thank you. Thank you for your excellent questions. Thank you.